All right, so here with Utah State gymnastics head coach Kristin White. So going to regionals, heading down to Salt Lake, traveling on Tuesday.
Yep.
And then just spending the day there, prepping for the meet on Wednesday. Dual meet with BYU. But I kind of want to go all the way back to when you took over this job. I know I think we had you on the show when you took over. I think we've had you on the show a couple of times since then.
Yep.
But when you took over, I know you've talked about the difficulty of taking over. I was looking at it earlier today. I think you had 11 players leave the program, graduations, transfers. I think 6 of them went to Clemson with Amy Smith, who was taking over, starting the program there. So I guess just talk about the difficulty of, that kind of attrition doesn't normally happen in gymnastics. I know basketball, they're getting used to it every year, but that's a very unusual amount of attrition. Just what did it take for you to rebuild the program, especially considering the standard had been set pretty high? So you had those expectations maybe from supporters, but was it difficult to try and fulfill those right away? I know you didn't have too much of a dip, but there was a bit of a dip, and now you're back up at the top of the conference.
I mean, I knew coming in, obviously, we were going to lose some student athletes, and that, there was nothing I was going to do to be able to change that, right? And so the first and foremost was we needed to get recruiting so that we could bring back, some athletes to Utah State to kind of fill some of those gaps that we had. And like you said, you don't really see that in gymnastics. We were the first and only program, quite honestly, that has ever gone through a massive rebuild like that. Even to today, a team might lose 1 or 2 athletes a year, but they don't lose almost their entire roster. So it was definitely challenging. I mean, they had just come off a conference championship. They were qualified to regionals. They had a very successful year the year prior. So there was a lot of pressure just in what were we going to do in the first year to keep this thing going, right? We didn't have the numbers like they had in the past. And so we had to work really hard to make that better, quite honestly. And I'm just so incredibly proud of our team, right? This is our 3rd year that we've been doing this. We've been recruiting really hard. Our staff has been committed to giving it our all from day one to make this process as seamless and as easy as possible for everybody. And so to be able to win a conference championship this year and go back to regionals, it's just, it just makes me incredibly proud of our team. I mean, our seniors and juniors have been with us day one since we've been here, and they've bought into the process, and you can see them improve every single year, not just in the competition floor, but in academics, in community service, in their leadership style. Like, they have grown into such tremendous women that I'm incredibly proud to see everything that they've done. And so for our team to reach every single goal we set this year, it's a huge accomplishment for them. And I'm just really looking forward to finishing out the rest of the year with our team.
Did the shift from the Mountain Rim Gymnastics Conference to the Mountain West, I know that was a couple of years, this is your second season, did that have any impact, or was it more of just it changed a couple of the teams that you faced in the season?
I think it did have an impact, right? Because the Mountain Rim was only created for the gymnastics schools that didn't have a major conference supporting them. So for us to be a part of the Mountain West was huge. It really created more of that championship feel, right? From a competitive standpoint, not too much has changed. We did lose BYU and Southern Utah, but we still do compete against them quite often. And so not much really changed from a gymnastics perspective. It was more just the feeling of being a part of a big conference, having the support from the Mountain West, like every other team here at Utah State does. And so I think that really excited our student athletes. In the past, when they won the Mountain Rim, they got a trophy, but they didn't get the t-shirts and the hats and like the social recognition that they get now with the Mountain West. So I think it just means more to them. And they were incredibly proud to represent the Mountain West at the regional championships this week.
Not to spend too much time on conferences, but just the minute you get settled in the Mountain West, there's a move to the Pac-12, although I'm kind of confused in how that works. There's just a lot fewer gymnastics programs in the country. From what I would understand, there's only 3 teams, at least that I could count on a real quick search.
Correct.
Future Pac-12 teams that would be in a conference. So would you see something similar to the Mountain Rim, where it's like you bring in a team that isn't necessarily from in the Pac-12, but fill out to that, at least 4 teams in the conference?
Yeah, so we are fully supported by the Pac-12. I think the 4th team could kind of depend on what other team the Pac-12 might add. from a football standpoint or basketball standpoint. If they have a gymnastics program, obviously we would love to have them be a part of our championship. However, if that doesn't happen, then I know that the Pac-12 will look at bringing in an affiliate and finalizing our conference from that standpoint. So I think there's still a little bit of unknown on exactly which direction we're going, but I do believe that it will be solidified hopefully sometime this summer so that we know going into the 26-27 competition year, we know exactly who's in our conference and who we'll be competing against.
Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about this year's conference championship. I know we had a chance to talk about this during this or after the selection show. I know you talked about PZF and that 0.05. But I kind of want to ask about the feeling going into that and just what led up to kind of, I guess, the disappointment there, because you were going into the Mountain West Championship. I mean, you guys were hosting, but you guys were, I think, third in national qualifying score. Not that's the end-all, be-all of where you're going to place in a meet, but, you know, you guys were the underdogs, and you came just that close to beating the two teams ahead. You beat one of the teams ahead of you in NQS. Just did that kind of add to the disappointment there and to the eventual motivation that you were the underdog and you nearly pulled off the upset at that, that magical upset at home?
Yeah, I mean, I think going into that championship, we didn't necessarily have the best year. We weren't the most consistent team, but we did have moments where we were great and that we knew that we could beat some of the teams that we were going against. And so there was no doubt in their mind they were going in to that competition to win the meet. And to come so short, it was very disappointing, but we still knew that we needed to get better and we needed to get mentally tougher. And so PZF really originated from that conference championship last year, losing by 0.05. But we took that motto and used it in different ways. The P stands for prepare, the Z is for zealous, and the F is for finish. So we wanted to make sure that we did everything we could in the off season to be ready for the season. And I think we saw that this year. We had a much better start this season. We were ready. Our student athletes really grinded it out in the preseason. And there was no doubt in anybody's mind when that first competition happened that we were ready to go. The zealous part really comes from just having fun in the process. We did a lot of different things this year that we hadn't done in the past. And so they were going to be tired. They were going to be more sore. We were going to ask more from them, but I never wanted them to forget that there's a reason why we're doing this and we love to have fun with what we're doing. And so that was just a constant reminder during those hard times, like there is a reason why we're doing this. And we just got to remember that we got to have fun doing it. Yeah. And then obviously finish for us, we wanted to be able to finish every turn we took in practice. We wanted to be able to finish every meet to the best of our ability. And we wanted to be able to finish the season with the goals that we had in mind for our team, which obviously came with winning a conference championship and going back to regionals. So just really proud of them of sticking it out, believing we are a much stronger, mentally tough team this year than I even imagined we probably would be. And I really do believe that came from the grind that we did in the preseason. We did a lot of work internally, working on our mental game and just putting ourselves in scenarios of what if something happens, how are we going to come out of it and be better for it? And so we had a lot of adversity this year, and they never shied away from a difficult task. And I think that's one of the things that I'm most proud about them is, if something happened, we got better through that process. Losing Nyla Morabito and Hattie Wright the last regular season meet of the year at Arizona, that was gut-wrenching for our team. You don't see that happen very often in gymnastics, to lose two athletes in the same warm-up within 5 minutes of each other. And so there were a lot of tears from our team, like devastated for their teammates, also probably a little bit of nervousness. What are we going to do to replace Nyla? She's been such a strong athlete for us. And we got better in that moment. And I was just so proud of how we came together and we fought for each other. And so I really think that moment really helped carry us through the conference championship, and know that if we do this together and we give our best in that moment, we really can reach any goal that we set.
You mentioned preparing mentally, and obviously you faced some of those situations and overcame them. How do you prepare yourself for those mental situations? Because it's kind of one of those things that you never know what you're going to do until you're in that moment. Like, what ways do you try and prepare your team to overcome those when they face that?
I think a lot of it, gymnastics is really hard, and we get very used to people coming out for an injury, whether it's a sprained ankle or for an illness, and kind of changing things on the fly. And so I think some of that is always kind of an unknown. It can happen, and this is what we're going to do, prepare for it. But a moment like that, I honestly don't think anybody was prepared for. Even as a coach, I think I was in shock for at least 30 minutes. Like, I can't believe this is happening. What's our next step? What are we going to go do? I don't want the athletes to know that, I'm sad, I'm scared, I'm nervous for them. And so I really had to do some self reflection and be strong and just tell them we're going to get through it and we're going to do our best gymnastics today. And so I also let them know I love them. There was a lot of like mom in me that came out in that moment and gave him some big hugs, and we shed some tears, and then we just grinded from there on out. So Coach Robert likes to play a lot of scenarios in his bar lineup. What if the lights go out in the arena and you can't warm up? How are you going to prepare for that situation? What happens if Sydney or somebody in our team is ill and can't compete? What are we going to do in that situation? So he does a lot of like different scenarios that I think just helps them in the long run to prepare that anything can happen, and they got to be ready whenever that moment does come, and they got to attack it and know what to do.
So something they can fall back on. So it's like it's one less thing for them to worry about.
Yeah.
In what is a very mental game.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to ask about, you also mentioned grinding things out in the preseason, and looking ahead to the regionals, probably one of the best references we have for that is the Best of Utah meet. I know that's a while ago, it was your second meet of the season, but it's our lone reference point at this point. Granted, that was one of your better things, your fourth best score of the year. You beat BYU, the team that you're facing. Of course, Utah, they put up like a dang near 198 because they're Utah. But is there anything you can take from that meet or anything you can learn from that, or is it just far enough back that you're just a different team at this point? There's not a whole lot maybe you can learn from those previous performances.
I still think there's a lot of things that we can learn from those moments. I think, one of the cool things is we actually started our season at the University of Utah this year, which that's where we're going back for the regional. And so it was the first time our freshmen had ever competed in that arena. So we are more prepared to go in there and do a great job because we've already competed in that environment. We know what it feels like. We know what their equipment feels like. We had some adversity in that meet that we had to kind of work through and get a little bit better. And so then having the Best of Utah, anytime you can compete against one of the Utah schools, you're fired up. You want to win. You want to put your best gymnastics out there. And I do think we are a much better team than what we showed at the Best of Utah, even though that was one of our best meets. Historically, the Best of Utah has always been one of our best meets just because of the environment of being on the podium and competing with the four schools from the state of Utah. So I do think that we are a better team. We're more mentally tough, and we're ready to go. They want to beat BYU. They want to qualify to round two. And if there's one thing I've learned from this team, when they set their mind to their goal, they're going to do everything they can to achieve it.
I know you mentioned the very first meet when you faced, was it Utah, the Southern Utah that you faced in that? Was it a tri-meet, I think, the season opener?
It was just Utah.
Was it just Utah? Okay. So I know in that one, you put up like a 194, and it's one of the lower scores. But then you followed it up with a 196. Just was that kind of a wake-up call? It's like, hey, this is not the start we wanted. And then pretty much immediately, you kind of got out of that funk.
To be honest, it actually was a really good start. I think when I came in your studio in the beginning, I talked about this new process with the scoreboard and how our judges were going to be evaluated. And so at the beginning of our season, scores were some of the historically lowest scores that we've seen in our sport for a very, very long time. And so I don't think the 194 was really reflective of the performance we did. I think it was the judges come out. It was the first meet of the season. They're a little bit rusty because they haven't been judging college for a while. And they were applying some of these more harsh deductions that we were asking them to apply. And so I think you saw that across the board for the first half of the competitive season. And I think judging has gone back to what we were more used to in the last few years, the last half of the season. And so I think some of it was just tight judging, but I really do think that we were the most prepared we've been since I've been here.
So the judges were just being haters.
I wouldn't say haters. Like, as a coaching association, we asked them to start applying these deductions and just be more consistent across the country. There are sometimes when you go to other competitions, same weekend, different set of judges, and the scores are much higher than you'll see across some other competitions in the same weekend. And so I think as an organization, we get frustrated because there isn't consistency in that, but we're also a subjective sport, right? And so different environments, different angles, like things can look different in their mind. So I think we were trying to do something new this year. I think unfortunately it probably failed miserably. And so we're going to have to go back into association and figure out what are we going to do to fix it. So judges are just doing their job, right? They judge the score and that's the score that they give. So but I do think it has changed over the last several weeks compared to what we've seen in the beginning of the season.
I'll ask you a trap question. How often do you disagree with the judges on the scores they give for your athletes?
To be honest with you, I don't ever really disagree with the score for the majority of the time that they give us, because I can see where those deductions come from. In our sport, if you if you are short on a handstand or you take a step, it could be half a tenth, 1/10, up to 3/10, right? So it is very subjective. So if a judge chooses to take the max 3/10 on a deduction for a skill, I can see that. I think sometimes as a coach, your frustration comes in, did they do that for the other team? Are they consistent in what they're taking? And so I think sometimes if you see me get pretty fired up at a meet with a score, it's because I want to make sure that it's consistent judging throughout, not so much of I don't believe they should have given that score. Because I do see where deductions can come from. And I like to give the judge the benefit of the doubt that they are truly giving us the best score that they think they should give us. So a lot of it's just from like, okay, if vault judging is a little bit tight, I want to make sure that vault judging is tight when the next team comes over. Even if they're a better team, it should still be tight if you were tight for my team. And so I think that's where a lot of the frustration gets is like, is it the same for both?
Yeah, it seems to be consistent across all sports.
Mm-hmm.
Getting mad at the officials is usually over about consistency than the call itself.
Yeah. Same thing with basketball. Like, no one really argues if it was a 2-point shot or a 3-point shot. It's more of like, did you call me for traveling? And did you call them for traveling? And if you didn't, like, we got to be consistent here, right?
So I want to ask about the athletes that qualified for regionals, with their own scores. And I forgot my notes. So it was Brianna, Nyla, and Abby.
So we had Brianna is doing bars and beam.
Yeah.
Nyla was actually qualified for vault and floor, but unfortunately had to pull out because of her injury. Then we had Avery, who is qualified on bars. Sydney Jellen qualified for balance beam. And then we actually just got a late add, London Vandertool, qualified on the uneven bars. Yeah.
I think it's confusing Avery for Abby. I don't know.
Yep, you're good.
But just tell me about those athletes in their work, because Brianna was the only one who qualified last year for regionals, and now you've got quite a few more who qualified. Just tell me about their seasons and their growth to being able to qualify for regionals.
Yeah, I think one of the coolest things is our team has known that BB has been the only one to qualify over the last 2 years. And I think it is no surprise that we had 5 qualify this year because of the success of the team. And so I think that's been one of the coolest moments to see them realize when the team is having great success and we're all on the same page, the individual accolades will come after. And so I think that was incredibly cool to have 5 athletes qualify to NCAA regionals. And they're excited. BB's been there twice in the last couple of years by herself, and she wanted to go with her team, and so she gets that opportunity. But for her, she wants to try to qualify the national championship. She's been close every year that she's been here, and so that is definitely a goal for her that she'll be wanting to try to achieve in round 2. She's been an awesome leader for us, and just really proud of everything she's done. In terms of some of our other individuals, Avery Bibby and London Vandertool, phenomenal bar workers. I think it's no surprise that both of them have qualified because they've been some of our highest bar scores this entire year. Avery's been in the bar lineup for 3 seasons at Utah State, and London is one of the best bar workers in the country. So they both have definitely earned that position. And, kudos to Coach Robert to have 3 bar workers competing in the regional is pretty incredible. And then over on beam, Sydney Jellen competing on beam. One of the coolest things is she's actually our starter on the beam lineup. And so sometimes people think your starter is maybe not the best athlete, right? And you're building your lineup so that your best athlete goes at the end of the lineup. And so for us, Sydney is one of our best beamers, and she is one of the toughest competitors I've ever met. So for her to be a starter is really awesome. And the fact that she's qualified to regionals in that position is really cool. So just incredibly proud of all the hard work that they've put in to get to this point, and excited to hopefully for them to compete as a team in round two. But if we don't qualify as a team, for them to have a ton of success individually to continue to move on.
I know you mentioned basically hitting all of your goals this season. It's just obviously, conference championship and regionals were probably, I imagine those were some of the goals.
Mm-hmm.
But just tell me about the goals that you wanted to see the team hit. Now, what are kind of the new goals as you head into regionals, and what you want to see from this team in regional qualifying, even though, getting to nationals is kind of a long shot for you guys.
Mm-hmm.
But what are the goals for you?
Yeah, so the 3 goals we had at the beginning of the year: win the Mountain West Championship, qualify to NCAA Regionals, and then maintain a 3.6 GPA. And we hit all of those. We actually got a 3.7 in the fall GPA. So incredibly proud. And then it's like, what else can we do, right? We hit all these goals. The next step, we want to go to round two. We feel like we are a team that deserves to be there. And we know that if we put our best gymnastics on the floor that day, we have a great shot. We just won the Mountain West Championship in a very tough environment with 4 really, really incredible teams. And so if we can come in with that same mindset that we want to move on, I think this team can definitely achieve it. And then obviously in round two, we want to have our best meet. It'll be the first time this year that we've done competitions back to back, which can be really challenging. You don't ever see that in our sport until you get into the postseason. And so I'm really excited to see how they handle just that quick turnaround time and their recovery and their mental game and being prepared for the next meet. So definitely would love to go to round two, put up a great meet. If we're there, there's some incredible teams with ton of history competing in that session with us, and it'll just be a great environment with all the fans they're supporting, and just looking forward to a great competition.
You actually brought up something I was kind of curious about, because I've always looked at gymnastics as, obviously, it's an incredibly physically demanding sport. Because there's some sports you can do back to back, as physically demanding as all sports are. Some you can pull off a lot of games in quick succession. I've always viewed gymnastics as not one of those sports, and yet when I saw the schedule, I was like, doing how many meets in a row? Just how difficult is that in a sport like gymnastics?
It is incredibly difficult. And, that's something our association has been continuing to try to fight for, is like a rest day in between, because just one competition is so mentally and physically draining for our athletes that trying to come back on day two, less than 24 hours later, and doing the same thing, it's just a lot. And so a few years ago, round one, two, and three were actually all in a row. And there was a team that was in round one that actually qualified to round two, ended up doing really well in round two, qualified to round three, and their athletes had to go 3 days in a row. And that's really unsafe for our sport. And so, we do things when we practice. We always practice back to back days for the majority of the time, so that we're kind of preparing them to get ready in the postseason. But you never truly know what they're going to do until they're placed in that moment. So, um, they're prepared for it. They know that it can happen. And so they've got to put themselves in the mindset of doing everything they possibly can on the front end to be recovered and ready to go for those 2 days. And I think from a scheduling standpoint, we've been very strategic in how we maintained our practice schedule from the conference championship to regionals to make sure that we are maximizing the most recovery time going into these next 2 competitions.
All right, Utah State Gymnastics coach Kristin White, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes.